What's up, guys? Colossal Football Talk here, back with a little bit of a different video this week. After we've been doing a lot of deep dive episodes into players, schemes and matchups, I wanted to bring you along as I fill up my Pro Bowl ballots. We're just a couple of days away from voting being closed, so hopefully you still see this in time and cast your own ballot. But even if you don't, at least you know who I believe should be going there in the reworked format, which has the two Manning brothers calling the shots, so that should be fun compared to the bad version of flag or touch football that we've seen in recent years, because now we get even more skills competitions and a legit flag football game. Either way, no matter what you think of the voting process and how much this really says about how good players are, it has real implications for contract negotiations, bonuses that have already been agreed upon, and a player's legacy in the long run when those Pro Bowl nominations are being brought up. So I think it's important to get the right names to Allegiant Stadium. And now let's go through this whole process together, position by position. Feel free to let me know afterwards where you agree or disagree. Starting things off with the offensive side of the ball, and the first position, of course, the quarterbacks. Let's get the obvious ones here out of the way. Patrick Mahomes, of course, coming off the worst game of his season so far against the Broncos team that has given him some trouble over the years. But other than that, he's been the most consistent at dicing up defenses from the pocket, but also just the most magical plays that we've seen all season long. Then Josh Allen, of course, as well, who beat Mahomes head-to-head, had a couple of bad red zone turnovers for a stretch there that kind of got overblown because he's also thrown some lasers and had huge scrambles to convert on third and long, as everything kind of flows through him in Buffalo, and he's been a main playmaker in the run and pass game there. And then the third one, kind of in the tier right now, Joe Burrow, played at an extremely high level. Has been a kill after the first month of the season, when the offense saw a dramatic shift in philosophy, now almost exclusively operating out of the shotgun, where Burrow has the mental capacity to work the quick game, but also navigates the pocket exceptionally well as concepts are developing, and he throws some strikes on those key downs. And then the fourth one here, Jalen Hurts, deservedly in the MVP conversation, has just continued to grow as a passer and has been one of the best deep ball throwers this season. There maybe aren't as many multifaceted reads and different types of throws that he has to execute, but the way that he can shake off rushes, extend plays, and become a freight train with the ball in his hands as a run himself is special. And then I'm deciding between two of these three. The first one, I think Geno Smith deserves to get a vote here, who I don't believe should be comeback player of the year because I don't believe he fits that description, considering he's never reached those heights before that he's at right now. But he's just been excellent at diagnosing post-snap rotations, making those big-time throws and extending plays. And then it's the social media discussion of the century between Tua Tagovailoa and Justin Herbert. Let's get used to stats here. And while Tua still leads the latter one in all kinds of efficiency metrics, operating in one of the most explosive offenses in the league, I think Herbert just closed the book on the debate Sunday night. His pocket navigation, ability to see the whole field, and deliver highly challenging passes to receivers who are well covered really stood out. Just that moment that he had with Keenan Allen there, them pointing at each other when he threw an absolute missile to him on a well-covered route. Bit further down here, Lamar Jackson, I thought, looked like an MVP candidate early on, and just looking at the back half of the schedule, I thought he had a path to get there, but the passing offense under Greg Roman has devolved there, and Lamar has made more mistakes than we're accustomed to seeing from him. Plus, of course, he's banged up right now. Really, the only other ones that you could consider here, I think, Kirk Cousins, the trigger man for a 10-win team, and has actually made a lot of big-time throws recently. And then Jared Goff leading the way, spraying the ball around to all kinds of playmakers that they have there in Detroit now, doing it for a top 5 offense. I think that's really kind of it. Maybe Trevor Lawrence here has had some moments of still looking like an overwhelmed young quarterback early on, but he's just continued to grow and has made several big-time throws, dicing up some of the better defenses in football. So let's give him some credit, and then move on to the running back position, where once again the obvious ones here, Josh Jacobs, of course, leading the league in scrimmage yards, who many believed could be part of more of a committee approach in Las Vegas, but has been a real bell cow for the silver and black, with how physical he's been between the tackles, the burst he has around traffic, and then a long speed to win games with those home runs in overtime like he did in Seattle. Then Saquon Barkley, who will probably be my choice for comeback player of the year since I just mentioned it. Similarly had some doubters coming into the season due to his injury history, but he's put together a great comeback campaign despite being really the only dependable skill position player on the Giants offense. So good at setting up running lanes, manipulating those second level defenders, and then of course has the natural talent to make guys miss, create yards after contact, and run away from the pursuit. Nick Chubb has been probably the best pure runner in all of football over the last 3 or 4 years. Just the subtleties of his running style and understanding of defenses are awesome to watch for film nerds like me, but I think everybody can appreciate the power and speed to punish opponents in a hurry. And then Christian McCaffrey, another guy in the running for comeback player of the year, actually put up some great numbers already for Panthers offense, which was dead last nearly in all offensive categories at the point he was traded. And then his talent has been obvious in a real offense in San Francisco, as he's returned to the status of the best dual-threat running back in the NFL, giving the Niners a different element in the passing game from that spots that we haven't really seen under Kyle Shanahan there. And I'm also going to put Tony Pollard up there. Just a phenomenal season. Had his time kind of a little bit here. No idea, last game he was kind of benched in the fourth quarter, I thought, against the Texans, because this guy has been special all season long. His explosion compared to Zeke in the backfield is really eye-opening. Runs so much more forceful than you'd expect. And once again, what he provides is an option out of the backfield, making guys miss on swing routes, along with being able to pull away from linebackers as he turns those into wheels, has made the Dallas offense so much more dangerous. Of course, there would be Derrick Henry, just had a 120-yard day against the Jaguars, but also 2 crucial fumbles. You can maybe put one of those not really on him, but hasn't been as consistently dominant as he's been in the past. And it's more about volume at this point, why he's up there, even though I will say that there haven't been a lot of open lanes there in Tennessee, a lot more stuffs at the line of scrimmage. So really it comes down to Austin Eckler, who's I think 4th in overall receptions among all players right now, with how much the Chargers have relied on him, with missing pieces on the O-line and the wide receiver corps. Then Aaron Jones has been the most consistent player on the Packers offense. Miles Sanders taking advantage of running behind the best offensive line in football, and is certainly taking the next step himself. But ultimately, I'm going to go with Ramondre Stevenson, kind of quietly having really a great season for the Patriots. Has been a top tier runner and receiver from that spot, which is rare to see in New England, where they rotate running backs so heavily usually. But just the physicality that runs the ball with, what he can bring in pass protection as a receiver, kind of a complete big back, which is kind of rare at this point in the NFL to really see. And that's going to move us to the next position here, which is the wide receivers. And this one is kind of easy here, at least the first 5 names, because I can just tick them all off. Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, and A.J. Brown. Just a little bit here, Justin Jefferson has just been unreal this season, even more so than he did when he set records for the most receiving yards as a rookie back then, and then through his first 2 seasons, inside and outside, winning off the line, shaking guys out of their boots, and then making mind-blowing catches down the field, just like that epic one-handed grab that he had against Buffalo, I think on a 4th and 18, which allowed the Vikings to make that comeback. Tyreek Hill has transformed that Dolphins offense, along with Mike McDaniel calling the shots there, thanks to the way that he creates windows underneath, some of the ways he's bailed out Tua on overthrown deep ball, some of the ways that he's bailed out Tua on underthrown deep balls, and legit jump balls that he's led him into, yet still delivering those home run plays as well on top of it, even though the defense not exactly what they're handling. Devontae Adams, still the smartest and most technically refined receiver in the game, almost untouchable off the line, so good at manipulating defenders with body language, and even when those guys are close, winning with late hands and natural adjustments to the ball in the air. Stephon Diggs then, just when we kind of thought that the target share could be split up a bit more between Gabe Davis, Isaiah McKenzie, and others, Diggs has been Josh Allen's primary target over the majority of plays. Those two are just so good at making things happen on the fly and being in sync with those adjustments, while Diggs has been great once again at head-faking defenders and working the sideline. A.J. Brown you see here, those numbers may not even do him justice, because he's made that Eagles offense incredibly tough to defend. You leave him one-on-one, he can beat anybody in the slant routes or lay down the field in contested situations. You let him catch the ball with his zone, and he becomes a bully after the catch. You try to bracket him or put a safety over the top, Philadelphia will pound you inside or go to Devonta Smith on the other side. And then the final one is kind of the toughest choice I'm going to have to make here so far. Jalen Waddle, you see him, and that entire second row really deserves to be mentioned for sure and considered along with a couple of other names below. I'm just going to scroll down a bit here. Of course, won't forget about Jalen Waddle. CeeDee Lamb has played his most consistent season yet as a pro. Amon-Ra St. Brown has sucked up a lot of the volume in Detroit, thanks to always being open, because of how good a route runner he is and how tough he is entering tight windows. The two Seattle guys, in Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, have both been great, but you almost can't separate them. A couple of rookies and former Ohio State teammates in Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, both been excellent for their squads. And very different though in terms of Olave being such a great technician, smooth player, while Wilson's more explosive and twitchy, looking some of the crazy run after catch plays that he's had. Christian Kirk has instantly been the number one in Jacksonville. Amari Cooper a bit further down here has quietly had a very good season as well before a certain quarterback switch. And T. Higgins really stepped up in the absence of Jamar Chase in Cincinnati. But I'm going to ultimately go and give some love to Terry McLaurin here, who has probably had the least dependable quarterback play, as good as Taylor Heineke has been at times. But you look at him roasting all-pro corners like Jair Alexander, mossing guys like Stephon Gilmore downfield, and quasi-game-winning catches in Indy, and just been a big play machine all season at like 15.5 yards per catch. So we're going to give him some love, and then move on to the fullbacks I think is next. Okay, you really want me to vote for 6 guys here, when both teams will be in 11 personnel for the majority of the game anyway and have those 3 receivers out there. We'll just ride with it, I guess. Obviously, easy ones here. Kyle Juszczyk, just a Swiss Army knife for the Niners offense, being able to play like a prototypical fullback, but also be utilized in a multitude of ways as a blocker on the move, flex out wide so they can spread the field on empty sets from 21 personnel. That's kind of unreal. Then I'm going to go with Alec Ingold, a really underrated piece for the Dolphins offense, thanks to what he provides as a kick-out blocker and on different wraparounds, but more so in the pass game, frequently being put in motion and becoming the flat option of the passing concepts, and the way that he forces defenses to have to be able to defend the run. Patrick Ricard also has been very good for Baltimore. It's not his fault that Greg Roman has him running pivot routes out of the slot at nearly 300 pounds. When he gets a chance to bury linebackers and take small defenders for a ride, when he's leading the way on those quarterback keeps, that is still awesome to watch. Then second row here, Jacob Johnson, or Jakob Johnson is actually German, leading the way for the league's leading rusher and Josh Jacobs, as the Raiders are in an old school I formation more than any other team in the league, and he's been awesome at moving linebackers out of the hole. Similarly, I'm also going to vote Kerry Blasingame for the Bears here all the way at the bottom. 0 total yards, but a lot of the dirty work for a Bears team that easily leads the league in total rushing yards. And finally, let's give Reggie Gilliam some love here. Has added a couple of cool elements to the Bills offense as they want to use more pro personnel, and he's been reliable as an option in the flats as well off play action. But that brings us to the tight ends here. And let's just get this first one out of the way. Travis Kelce, of course. You can just see it here in the numbers. Has really been in a league of his own. Over 1,000 receiving yards already when nobody else even has a 700 yet. Now without Tyreek Hill, everything for Kansas City flows through him. And yet he's produced in an insane way compared to the rest of the position. Then second, TJ Hawkinson has been a really nice addition to the Vikings offense because of how much better of a blocker he's in line than what they had in Irv Smith for them early on. And then he's so dependable working in the middle of the field, being able to beat linebackers out of the slot, and effectively getting vertical with the ball in his hands. Mark Andrews hasn't nearly produced at the same level that he did in 2021 due to injuries himself and some inconsistent quarterback play at times. Also him not hauling in passes that he really should, so that definitely has banged him down a bit. But the way that he can stretch the seams and the way that they target him in Baltimore on those deep crossing routes, he's really the one guy for them that defenses have to be afraid of. Pat Freiermuth quietly having an excellent season himself, which is indicated by the Steelers feeling confident to trade away Chase Claypool at the deadline, since Freiermuth is the guy that they want to use on a lot of those crossers and routes over the middle of the field, and he's produced all season long, even though he's only reached the end zone twice. And David Njoku as well, on the top row, has missed a couple of games, but he's been a highlight waiting to happen, whether it's making those one-handed touchdown grabs on 4th down, which ended in them winning in overtime against the Bucs, hurdling defenders, or just now diving for the pylon. He's a mismatch against pretty much anybody in the league. And the final one isn't easy. We've got Evan Ingram kind of a monster game, before which he was closer to the middle of the pack in terms of receiving yards. George Kittle kind of getting lost in the shuffle there in San Francisco because of how loaded that offense is with skill position talent around him, but he's still an excellent blocker and makes big plays when needed most. Gerald Everett, alright, he's been okay. Taysom Hill kind of has an interesting case here, as he rarely lines up at tight end actually, but is kind of an offensive weapon for the Saints. But I'm ultimately gonna go with Kittle, since he's the most well-rounded of the bunch. Now let's move on to the big boys, starting with the offensive tackle position. No sides here, which is kind of weird because you'll later see that they list free and strong safety, plus some other weird classifications on defense. Let's just start here with the obvious ones once again. Have to scroll down here to the letter W. I mean, kind of weird here because it doesn't seem to be listed by names or anything else really. So either way, let's just go from here. Trent Williams, maybe the most intimidating player in all of football, an ass kicker in the run game who can blow the front side wide open, but also seal off the backside very effectively. Almost nothing that you can really attack in his pass sets with his big frame, athletic feet, and the way that he can snatch guys and just not let them go. And we'll have to kind of search here because I wrote down these names beforehand so it would be easier to find, but it doesn't seem to be right now. Yeah, all the way at the bottom. Andrew Thomas for the Giants has really had a crazy transformation. Looking back at just a rough rookie season to plus starter in year 2 and now an all-pro level candidate. Outstanding on the scoop blocks on the backside of those outside zone concepts that has stood out to me on multiple occasions this season, and just so much more sound and confident in his ability to mirror pass rushes. Then in that same division, there's one Eagle. Let's find the other one that I really want to talk about here. Lane Johnson on that right side. I think he hasn't given up a sack in 2 full calendar years now. Just so athletic out there on an island to count the speed off the edge, mirror counters inside, and recover when it is one of those rare occasions when it's initially beat. That skill set is a big plus when you try to get around the right corner as well, as he can reach block edge defenders and allow the running backs to bounce up wide. And I know he's hurt right now, but I'm also going to vote for Tristan Wirfs here. Already in competition with Lane for the title as the best right tackle in the game. A little more of a bruiser in the run game as part of more of a vertically oriented scheme. But if he isn't fighting for an injury, he's almost unbeatable in pass pro at this point as well, because he's another highly explosive athlete who can cut off the rush angles for opposing guys. And then once again, I believe we have to go to the bottom here for Christian Darrisaw for the Vikings. We just saw the impact that his absence made against the Lions. Only 1 sack surrendered all season. Been a big reason in Kirk Cousins' success this season, protecting his blind sides, along with the way that he can cover up bodies and allow the running backs to press the front side behind him. The final one is a bit tougher. Just some of the names that I was thinking about. Jake Matthews and Caleb McGarry, for that matter, deserve credit for what they've done in Atlanta's run-heavy scheme. Laramie Tunsil has quietly been one of the 2 bright spots for the Texans' offense, along with rookie running back Dameon Pierce. The 2 rookies for Seattle, and Charles Cross and Abe Lucas, should get a shout out here as well. I think down here as well, Ronnie Stanley has been excellent when available. And Ryan Ramczyk for the Saints, I think he's a bit further up. He's been one of the most consistent tackles in football, just maybe not his best season. Ultimately, I'm going to go with the man of the hour in Penei Sewell, the second-year man out of Oregon, who was my number 2 overall prospect behind only Trevor Lawrence last year. Just caught the game-sealing pass on 3rd and long against Minnesota this past Sunday. Just an awesome moment. But it's obviously more about the movement he creates at the point of attack as a run blocker. Now having perfected his technique, along with the rare athletic gifts as a pass protector, he's been awesome, and so has the whole Lions offensive line, which we'll talk some more about still here. But let's move on inside now with the guard position. Got like 4 or 5 pretty obvious ones that I want to get out of the way here. First up, Zach Martin for the Cowboys. Back to being the best guard in football, especially with Quentin Nelson, and that entire Colts offensive line having a down year. Just a bully in the run game, where he and right tackle Terrence Steele, who unfortunately just went on IR, I believe, have absolutely taken defensive linemen for a ride on combo blocks all year long. And once he gets his hands on you in passing situations, the play's basically over for you. Just a row above here, Chris Lindstrom has been kind of the only one in the tier with Martin. Always been an underrated player, I feel like, but he's a legit all-pro this season, kicking ass, blocking down, riding guys in zone concepts, and butting guys in the second level for Atlanta, and he's only been penalized once. Then I want to go to Joel Bitonio, which we'll have to scroll down for, I believe. Yeah, all the way down here, alright. So yeah, Joel Bitonio for the Browns has been one of the best guards in football as well for the last 3 or 4 years now. More consistent on a down-in, down-out basis this season than his running mate, Wyatt Teller, who we can also see on the screen right now. Great zone blocker as well as a puller, mirrors interior rushes exceptionally well, and just gets it down for the Browns. Back to the great lines of line that I already referenced. Jonah Jackson a couple of spots over here. Outstanding balance and ability to just not lose reps in pass pro, even if he doesn't set the anchor or slides perfectly in front of guys. That's already stood out to me at Ohio State as well. His ability to recover is exceptional. And then he's a super versatile piece in the run game. Kickouts, long pulls, climbing to the second level, getting out in space in the screen bay, all around a great player. Which now we get back to scrolling, and I think we might have to go all the way to the top here. If I remember correctly looking at this earlier. Yeah, Cody Whitehair for the Bears. One of those few bright spots, along with obviously what we've seen from the quarterback position with Justin Fields. He's going to get some love from me here. Powerful guy on the interior for the Bears O-line. As clearly the most consistent piece that they have. You see a lot of runs his way, whether David Montgomery gets behind him or Khalil Herbert's when he was still healthy, hitting big cutbacks underneath his blocks. The final one is kind of tough here. Both Eagles guards, Landon Dickerson and Isaac Samalu, deserve some consideration. Kevin Zeitler for the Ravens has been one of the better guards over the last couple of years. Brandon Scherf and Quentin Nelson both not having the best seasons. So I'm gonna go, if I can find him here, Jalen Fooney for the Chiefs. Has been one of the premier pass protecting interior linemen in the NFL. We've seen the Chiefs transition to more of a downhill run scheme when Andy Reid doesn't get too pass happy, which kind of once again happened last week, and he's been doing a good job all season long. Which has us moving on to center now, the final position on offense. Again, why do we vote for 6 guys here when there's twice as many guards and tackles respectively next to the player on his own unit? But okay, so first one that I want to get out of the way here, and it used to be at the top, I believe, yeah. So Jason Kelce for the Eagles, even at an advanced age now, still excellent thanks to his athleticism, which allows the Eagles to do a lot of stuff that other teams just simply can't. And they don't ask him to be a vertical mauler, but long pulls, fold blocks, beating linebackers to the spot and pinning them inside. The communication skills to ID pressures pre-snap and then pass-off twist and stuff like that is just exceptional. We got Creed Humphreys, and we just talked about the Chiefs at center. Along with Jalen Fooney, has been tremendous on the interior for that group. Great grip strength and ability to play with leverage and positioning his body accordingly. I don't think he's been responsible for a sack yet as a pro, being able to set the anchor on guys and not allowing them to get away from him anymore. And then let's just keep throwing love at that Lions O-line that I just talked about with Frank Ragnow, one of my personal favorite players in the NFL. Tremendous understanding for angles and body positioning in the run game, works so well in concert with his guards, rarely gets out of position, isolated passing situations, and his hustle in the screen game is just unmatched. Then all the way at the top here, let's talk about a rookie. Tyler Linderbaum for the Ravens has already been awesome right away as a rookie. We've seen the Ravens run more outside zone thanks to his lateral mobility, and he's had some really cool moments already, burying linebackers such as Devin White and the Bucks. Has always played bigger than his size would indicate to deal with those big nose tackles, along with the agility to mirror twitchy inside rushers and get in front of blitzers. You could go with a couple of different guys here now. Bradley Bozeman for the Panthers has quietly had back-to-back seasons, back then with the Ravens, that really would have been worthy of Pro Bowl votes. Mitch Morse has been very good for the Bills, and he's been much better when he's been out there. Ted Karras has looked a lot better on those more vertical run schemes that are built on angles where he blocks down or pulls rather than having to move laterally for Cincinnati. And then Ben Jones, I think he's all the way at the bottom here. Just a warrior out there fighting for injuries all year, but has played very well. I'm ultimately going to go with Corey Linsley here for the first one, who has missed some time with injury, but there's been a big difference with him in the lineup when you look at the Chargers' ability to sort through different games. And even if Justin Herbert has moved around, he typically has that space to hitch up and then get wide because Linsley is there. And the run game has also been slightly better with him in there. And the final one, David Andrews for the Patriots, has been doing it for the Pats for a long time. And when New England has been able to control games, it's been thanks to pounding the ball right up the gut behind this guy, only one sack allowed so far this year. a name that will kind of be forgotten outside of New England, but has been very good throughout his career. And now let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball, starting with the defensive end position. And this is where things just get a little stupid, to be honest, because whilst everybody seems to have embraced the shift to differentiating between edge defenders, interior D linemen, and off-ball linebackers, other than the NFL itself apparently, so this is an unfair way to categorize guys like John Franklin Myers, Christian Wilkins, and others, who are de facto interior D linemen by lining up head up or inside the tackle for the majority of snaps. But here they're listed with those true edge rushers with sacks, so I'll just have to scroll down a little bit more here in order to not miss anybody. Either way, let's get the obvious ones out of the way. I really don't see how you can't vote these top 3 guys, and I don't want to go chalk, but I mean, Nick Bosa, my choice for Defensive Player of the Year before the season started, and I think he should be the frontrunner right now. An absolute beast out there, leads the NFL in sacks, total pressures, pass rush win rate, and more. Also tied for second in tackles for loss now. But just go back to the Chiefs game and how they made it a priority to not even attempt to block him in favor of reading or kind of just take him out of plays. Myles Garrett has those moments where he just takes over games single-handedly. Absurd twitchiness and flexibility for that size, along with the power to ride tackles backwards into the quarterback's lap. He's somebody who lines up over guards more regularly and creates havoc that way. Easily the most consistent player on the Browns D-line, which is really struggling against the run, but his ability to lock out with those long arms and make plays on the ball carrier is highly valuable for them. And then Max Crosby, the fact that he's number 1 among all defensive ends and second overall among defensive linemen in total tackles just tells you this guy's level of activity, his motor to constantly chase after plays and get involved in tackles, how he just continues to work as a pass rusher, along with having that absurd length and very misclassified athleticism when you look at his RES score. The one guy who shows up in a major way every single week for bad Raiders defense. And I'm also going to group in there Brian Burns for the Panthers. His speed off the edge is second to none in this league, plus then he can hit those devastating spin moves, which really stress tackles in the pass sets. He's produced despite not being in positive game strips a whole lot, and despite having more of a slender build, he puts in great work in run defense. The fact that teams were willing to part ways with 2 first-round picks to acquire this guy really tells you everything you need to know. After that, you can go with a lot of different names here. I think Trey Hendrickson, as you scroll down a little bit here, kind of has to be up there. I think he's going to miss a couple of weeks now, which sucks. But I know only 6 sacks, but I think he's still top 5 in total pressures, just quietly affecting games on basically every other play, along with Sam Hubbard on the opposite edge, as you see over here for the Bengals, who's also having a very good season, as those guys do a great job of setting the edge and getting peeled off in coverage quite regularly as well. And for the final one, as we scroll back up, Yannick Ngakoue, I think a lot of schemed up sacks. Don't get me wrong, a very good player, but just because of how much he's worked on Gus Bradley, who loves to run those games with him. Those 2 Dallas guys in Dorrance Armstrong and DeMarcus Lawrence both deserve to be mentioned. If I had to vote for one of the Eagles guys, it would be Josh Sweat, to be honest, who is having a very good year. Aiden Hutchinson making the second half push for Defensive Rookie of the Year. But ultimately, as we scroll down here, and I don't want to rob you of any of those names, you can have a look yourself. There's some names here who definitely deserve to be mentioned. But the one guy that I really wanted to show some love to, Christian Wilkins for the Dolphins. He has been awesome this year. Just 2.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble. Forget all those numbers. He just had a monster game against the Chargers, and really his impact may not be really captured on the stat sheet, but the way that he can beat blockers off the snap, be the one guy on that front to really create disruption on the interior, leading to negative runs and getting quarterbacks to move the spot, he's just been outstanding, and he actually leads all D linemen in total tackles, along with non-sack plays that lead to no yardage or negative yardage, I believe. He's number 1 in that statistic among all players, which includes linebackers, so he's been crazy and should really be categorized with the defensive tackles, which is the position that we'll get to here next. Once again, just a couple of very easy names to take off here. Chris Jones has been the top interior rusher in the league, not named Aaron Donald, almost from the day that he's entered the NFL, and he might now be number 1. Too big, too strong, too quick, too flexible really for anybody to handle. And then I've loved what I've seen from him, the way that he's bought in run defense, owning gaps and stonewalling guards. along with the absurd quickness to still get his hands on the ball carrier and rack up tackles for loss. And also, of course, Quinn Williams has ascended from a Pro Bowl level player to a legit All-Pro this season, while setting the tone for a top 6 defense in the NFL, where he constantly creates disruption in the run game and forces cutbacks into those maniacs on the second level, relying on a multitude of games up front, where Quinn doesn't mind doing the dirty work, even though he can consistently dominate blockers one-on-one with his explosion, rapid hands, and power. Speaking of power, Jeffrey Simmons, he is just a force of nature. The way that he can lift guys up well above 300 pounds and just displace them against their will is wild to see in the NFL. He frequently makes ball carriers run into the backs of blockers, and he's the key to one of the most dangerous pass rush units in the league, because those edge guys can take wider angles since quarterbacks are forced to stack backwards with somebody being pushed into their laps constantly. You could really go with both the Bama guys for Washington here in Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen. I'm definitely going to give the nod to John Allen, who has been using guards as blocking sheds backwards towards the ball a lot of times, absolutely bowling guys 330 plus pounds on a weekly basis, and then having the quicks to make plays in the backfield as he disengages from those guys. I'm not quite sure if that sack number is indicative of what Payne has done rushing the passer, as those 8.5 sacks make up nearly half of his total pressures, although he's still a super valuable player holding up against double teams and keeping the second level clear in the run game. Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox here, both for the Eagles, have been doing a great job of crushing interior of pockets and tossing guys aside. Then we got Vita Vea. My god, he's a force in the middle for the Bucks. Just not the greatest season for that entire unit. As you scroll down here, we got Cam Hayward having another excellent season. Maybe has fallen off a little bit from his hot start to the year, but he's a monster interior for Pittsburgh. The one guy I'm definitely picking above those guys is Dexter Lawrence for the Giants, who has also been a beast on the inside for a 7-win Giants team, where his ability to swallow blocks in the run game and collapse the interior of the opposing pockets has really stood out, even though some of the other personnel on that unit leaves things to be desired. But the Giants definitely punching above the weight this season, and a guy like him is a big reason for it. And then my final vote goes to DeForest Buckner here of the Colts. Another guy who's just excelled on a bad indie team, which somehow is now 12th in defensive DVOA, I think right now, which I looked up earlier. Despite missing Shaq Leonard, because of the way that Defo is manhandling guys up front, helps free up fellow pass rushers on twists and forces ball carriers to redirect no matter where he lines up along the interior of the front. Gotta show him some love here. And then we get to the linebacker portion, starting with the inside guys. And these are listed by total tackles, of course, which benefits players in bad defenses who get to be on the field a whole lot, and many of those tackles may be in positive plays for the opposing offense. Once again, obvious ones, as I always say, this might be the easiest choice of any position, as we really have to scroll down here. Fred Warner of the 49ers. I mean, what can you really say about this guy? His range and instincts as a coverage defender allow the 49ers to play coverages differently than basically any other team in the league. Constantly takes away throws over the middle of the field and forces quarterbacks to hold on to the ball to allow the pass rush to get home, along with how quickly he triggers on stuff in the run and screen game to stop plays before they can even get anything going. He's a huge piece for clearly the best defense in the NFL right now. Then we go back up to the top with Nick Bolton for the Chiefs, who I gave some pop to a couple of weeks ago when I previewed the Chiefs-Bengals matchup, looking at how much he trusts his eyes and beats blockers to the spot along with it, making way more plays outside the hashes now, along with still being a thump on the inside. And he's a very useful pressure player when defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo wants to send extra pressure. Roquan Smith for the Ravens, going over from Chicago, has fit in flawlessly with Baltimore. Just got his first interception with the team, 3 on the season so far, I believe. And right away, his ability to do ID run schemes and meet ball carriers in the hole, his secure tackling skills, being able to recognize targets in space as a coverage defender, which allows his new running mate Patrick Queen to be primarily used as a blitz on passing downs. And then when Baltimore sends him, he's also very good at sorting through and getting home himself. Maybe a bit of a controversial one, this next one, because he had a rough stretch in the middle of the season. Devin White for the Bucks at some point got called out by Hall of Fame defensive tackle for the Bucks and Warren Sapp, as he struggled to work off blocks with teams running a lot of outside zone and getting somebody onto him. But his speed to run things down to the edges and the way that he can create run stops when it initially looks like it could be a chunk play for opponents, it's just insane. Kind of what they ask of him in general, not putting him in a lot of great situations, but he kind of still makes it work. And he's arguably the best off-ball blitzer in the NFL right now, with the closing speed and forced to just run through backs in protection. He's pretty crazy to watch. And then a guy who doesn't get the credit that he deserves, but has been playing the position at top 5 level this season, I believe, is David Long of the Titans. One of the most underappreciated guys in the entire league, and a key player for the Tennessee. So good at reading things out, filling gaps before they can really develop, and making up those negative box counts, as Tennessee is near the top of the league in run stop percentage, despite playing with some of the lightest boxes in the league. Plus then he understands how to pass off and take over routes and zone coverage exceptionally well. And then there are so many other names deserving consideration here. Let's move back up to the top here. Jordan Brooks and Fuesi Aluakun. We see 2 and 3 in total tackles. Those guys are very useful players for their respective defenses and kind of lesser known names. Dre Greenlaw for the 49ers, the other guy, kind of the Robin to Fred Warner's Batman. He deserves some love. Both the Bengals linebackers, Logan Wilson and Tremaine Pratt, don't get enough credit, I believe, as well. Demario Davis, a bit further down here for the Saints. Unfortunately not having his best season for New Orleans team that has really fallen off. Shaq Thompson for the Panthers. And Tremaine Edmonds, kind of see him in the same light. Those freaky, rangy guys chasing things down for the mic spot for the respective teams. But I'm ultimately going to go with Isaiah Simmons here for the Cardinals, because he's made the biggest impact splash-like plays of the entire group probably. Had that big pick 6 against the Saints, a strip sack and recovery against the Vikings. Altogether 3 sacks, 5 PBUs, and several crazy plays where he runs down stuff all over the field. He deserves a nod in his first season. And then we get to the outsides, and that's where it's really unfair, because these guys are listed by sacks here once again, despite a lot of the names here getting to blitz off the ball maybe once or twice a game as true stand-up linebackers. But let's work through this. A couple names here at the top, of course. Micah Parsons, who actually has played extended time off the ball, where he has some great reps in pass coverage, but clearly at his best on the edge, creating negative plays in the run game, and putting tackles in hell for 4 quarters as he tried to figure out how to deal with his speed off the corner. Now he's learning to jump back inside on guys who overset him and convert speed to power. The guy is scary good already in just his second season. And then also Matthew Judon, of course, tied with Nick Bosa for the league lead in sacks and second in total pressures, has led the way for a Patriots defense that is top 5 overall according to multiple metrics and near the top in total pressure percentage. Also a very useful player in run defense, being able to hold his ground, but also backdoor players and run things down from the backside. Creates more disruption than we're accustomed to seeing from those New England outside linebackers. He's just been great. And then of course his teammate Joshua Uche would be in double-digit sacks as well, I believe now, but he's not even listed at any position, so that's really unfair to him, I believe. Maybe another one of those guys that Bill Belichick doesn't want to put on the ballot because they will end up with him having to pay more money, kind of what he did with J.C. Jackson a few years ago. I don't want to accuse him here of anything, but that's something that I've seen show up. And then the other guy up here, Za'Darius Smith for the Vikings. I mean, what can you really say about the guy? By far the most consistent player on the Vikings defense, I believe. Kind of a chess piece for Ed Donatel, who otherwise runs a fairly simplistic scheme that has been vulnerable for most of the year, but the way that he can move the guy all over the front and bring from different angles, constantly drawing the eyes of offensive coordinators and offensive lines, and still creating havoc, he's been a tremendous addition. Now, which true off-ball linebackers should we not miss for this group? As you can see, just it makes sense, of course, in terms of the sacks. That you see a lot of these guys, rarely anyone, just very little guys that actually play off the ball. But one of those names, as I scroll down here, Matt Milano for the Bills. He's the one name that I absolutely don't want to miss here. So consistent with reading his keys and setting tackles, as he makes up for a lot of the chaos that those other guys create and potentially leave themselves vulnerable. Amazing coverage player who squeezes down passing lanes and communicates with his teammates at a very high level as the leader in the middle of the Buffalo defense. So absolutely want to show him some love. Another guy, absolute maniac this year, probably the greatest highlight reel in terms of pure tackles, Quincy Williams for the Jets. Needs to be recognized on the national level for the way that he's been running around and blowing people up all season. Willie Gay, the other guy for the Chiefs, he's had an excellent season next to Nick Bolton. But I'm going to choose between 4 edge guys here back at the top. And that's going to be Alex Highsmith, Hassan Reddick, Bradley Chubb, and Denico Autry. Highsmith has really stepped up in the absence of TJ Watt as one of the most effective pass rushers in football, although he needs to finish tackles more consistently. Hassan Reddick has been a really cool addition for Philly because he's this hybrid Sam linebacker who they can drop into coverage or let him use his speed off the edge, rushing, along with being a very active run defender, working off blocks. Bradley Chubb, going from the Broncos to the Dolphins, has been very efficient at rushing the passer as well for both teams. 3 forced fumbles already this season, I believe, along with bringing it on every single snap. And then Denico Autry as one of the most effective guys off the edge for a great Titans pass rush. His absence has been felt in a couple of games because of the way that he can win from different alignments and affect the pocket. Uchenna Nwosu for Seattle has to be mentioned here as well. Just been doing a great job as the one true threat that they have rushing the passer. But I'm ultimately going to go with Hassan Reddick and Bradley Chubb. I think the metrics for them in terms of pass rush win percentage and stuff like that is the best as well, although Denico Autry is very close behind them. And then we move on to the secondary now with the cornerback position, where we could maybe differentiate between outside and inside primarily as well. But more importantly, something like passer rating allowed would be more indicative than just interceptions, because you're obviously going to vote some guys who maybe don't play very consistent coverage but have been able to get those big plays and create turnovers. Either way, the obvious ones here, Marlon Humphrey for the Ravens, just probably the most physical corner in football, actively guiding receivers into the sideline and playing through the hands whilst looking back for the ball. You can't really attack him later in the plays because those really become 50-50 balls. Plus then, of course, he takes pride in run defense and constantly is looking to punch the ball out of the hands of ball carriers. In that same row, we have Darius Slay for the Eagles. His best season probably since his early days in Detroit. Tremendous at squeezing on routes and quarters and funneling everything back towards the safeties, whilst also having some awesome snaps and tape in man coverage against guys like Justin Jefferson. Excellent tackler as he races up into the flats, and so smart at recognizing patterns and play designs altogether. Just having a great season. I think a couple of rookies absolutely deserve to be up here already. As we scroll down a bit, Sauce Gardner for the Jets. He has absolutely been outstanding and the front runner for Defensive Rookie of the Year right now. Midpointing routes in zone coverage and fooling some of the game's best. Sticking with guys across the field on man snaps. Confidently playing the catch points. And already playing like a veteran with the way that he reads splits, understands tendencies, and playing on the edge of what is legal. And then as we get all the way to the top, the guy that is tied for the lead league in interceptions, Tariq Woolen for the Seahawks, showing tremendous ball skills, other than the layup that he had against Tom Brady in Munich. But despite his stature, I mean, just look at his RES or his spider graph. It's just absurd, 6'4", 4'2" speed. He's a one-of-a-kind athlete, but also really so good already at reading and driving on routes and off coverage despite his size. And his corner-like wingspan, being able to wrap around and knock down passes that would otherwise be routine catches. And then also just missing 1 tackle all season long. I looked it up earlier. That's kind of insane. For the final 2, I want to scroll all the way down to the scrubs, who have only 1 interception so far. So, kind of just making fun of the way that they are listed here. And we still don't have him. Patrick Surtain of the Broncos, who by the definition of not allowing guys to catch the ball against him, has been about as good as anybody out there. He had that one play where he looked really bad against Davante Adams in overtime, where he had to jump one of the Raiders staples, but Davante, instead of breaking inside, bent it back to the corner and he scored the game-winning touchdown. More of a sign of how well he studies the game already and anticipated the play coming. Broncos play a lot of zone coverage, but his ability to anticipate patterns and be so sound in his technique when he is playing in man is just rare for a second-year guy. And then I really considered J.C. Horn here for the Panthers, having an outstanding second season. But I'm actually going to go, as we scroll back up here, with Jair Alexander. Second, with those 4 interceptions. Had a couple of bad moments, and I'm sure plenty of people don't like him, but plays the position with a tremendous level of confidence and football IQ. Has those 4 picks on the year, but it's a lot of the reps where he sticks with guys through the break pound, forces them to work through contact, and kind of just frustrates them throughout games. That has always been key with him. Some guys I want to mention here: Denzel Ward having a very underwhelming year, Jalen Ramsey not having his best season, but still a very good player. Mike Hilton, the best nickel in the game, deserves some love. And then up here as well, Trevon Diggs for the Cowboys. Might actually be better than he was last year in terms of coverage. Along with James Bradbury for the Eagles, who has been a tremendous running mate for Darius Slay in Philly. But let's move on to the safety position, starting with strong safety. And once again, this is kind of where we get into the weird details, because nobody who understands modern football uses the term strong and free anymore, really, other than maybe on the whiteboard, but rather they differentiate between field and boundary safety. What do you call some of those bigger-bodied slot defenders? We really may need to overhaul the voting process here, as well as why they list by tackles. Still, I'm going to give you my names here, and the first name up, Derwin James for the Chargers, who that defense largely revolves around his ability to play in a deep post and with range, but also covering some of the best tight ends one-on-one, driving on routes from depth, blitzing off the slots, and tossing running backs aside, his tackling skills in space, just the ability to plug all different roles and be kind of the queen of the chessboard for Brandon Staley. He's a pretty unique player. Then I want to talk about Talanoa Hufanga for the 49ers. Such a fun player. On a San Francisco defense filled with studs on all three levels, this guy has been as impressive as anybody. While the coverages that they run there are more based on modern principles, this guy's kind of like the enforcer of that unit, in the mold of a Cam Chancellor or Dante Whitner. His ability to dislodge the ball from receivers and quarters when he's driving up on routes, his feel for targets around him coming down as a robber, run the alley in the run game. He had that game-sealing pick against the Rams. He's really just been unbelievable. And the other name here in that row as well, Jordan Whitehead for the Jets, kind of a similar role for that defense, who has brought that defensive mindset over from San Francisco with Robert Saleh, plays the game with a ton of confidence and physicality. I showed a play a couple of weeks ago where the receiver had to play DB on him as Whitehead undercut a deep out route on a flood concept. Really a tremendous play, but also just the way that he can fill against the run as they rotate him down low on some early downs to great run stops that really helps the Jets get opponents to third and long, where they can unleash the pass rush. The next name up here, and I think I have to scroll down a little bit here. We got to Jordan Poyer for the Bills. Has been as stable for Buffalo as any player there. His understanding for passing concepts, not voiding his area, but also being able to make plays outside of it. The way that he takes care of run support duties. He's become a ball hawk over the last couple of seasons, along with just being safe and not allowing big plays. And then his tackling skills with just 2 misses all season long. This guy just gets the job done for Buffalo. And then Kyle Duggar for the Patriots in the same division has gone from a freaky small school athlete to a real weapon at Bill Belichick's disposal, heavily being deployed as a tight end race in certain matchups, but also his range in 2 high shells to make plays at the catch point outside the numbers, that way that he can drop him down into the box and create stalemates with offensive linemen at times. And once again, how effective he is as a tackler have really stood out. Also just had a huge forced fumble on DeAndre Hopkins to set up a crucial scoop and score at Arizona. The last name here is a bit tougher, lots of good choices. Andrew Adams is a guy nobody talks about, but has been a key player on Tennessee. Obviously, at the top, as we scroll back up here, you have Harrison Smith with those 5 interceptions. Maybe wouldn't quite equate those to his overall play and coverage, I would say, for the season. Jaquan Brisker has been excellent as a rookie for a bad Bears defense. Von Bell for the Bengals, as we move down a little bit here, is a very underrated guy for that defense. But let's give some love to the Washington guys. Cam Curl is great, of course, but Derek Forrest, the other guy on that unit, has been a turnover machine, as you can see here. 3 interceptions, a couple of forced fumbles. He routinely blows up people when he gets a chance to, tracks the ball's flight exceptionally well, and had a great toe tap catch in one of those picks early in the season. His ability to close down windows between the second and third level has made it a lot tougher for opposing quarterbacks to attack that area of the field against them. I really liked him as the other safety coming out of Cincinnati a couple of years ago, and he's worked out great. Leading us to the final position on defense at free safety. Of course, these guys are listed by interceptions for whatever reason. Once again, a couple of obvious ones. Micah Fitzpatrick for the Steelers was on path for Defensive Player of the Year season early on. His understanding for down and distance, offensive tendencies based on formations, and how he trusts his eyes and mind is second to none in the league. but the way he blows up guys on benders and seam routes is also really cool. Has those 4 interceptions, 1 return to the house in the season opener, and could have easily had another one at Atlanta a couple of weeks ago if he didn't pull up to seal the win, and has 8 more passes broken up along with that. Then we've got Justin Simmons, who's made a massive difference for the Denver defense when he's been in there compared to a couple of games that he's missed. Really one of those do-everything safeties who can play high and low, read the ass of the quarterback, close ground in a hurry, great ball skills, excellent tackle in space, and has created a lot of crucial stops for one of the best defenses in football, which isn't really talked about just because of how bad the offense has been there in Denver. Javon Holland for the Dolphins. The interceptions have kind of stopped coming in the second half of the season, but this guy's range is just unreal. He had a play a couple of weeks ago at San Francisco that is still burned through my mind because the Niners had a layup and he just came out of nowhere. You can't throw curls or stuff like that in front of him when he's allowed to drive in routes and 2-out shells. He can be a true deep middle free safety as well with numbers to numbers impact. And he can make up for a lot of stuff where offenses could rip off huge plays, but he all of a sudden just shows up. Then let's throw some love at the rookie here, Kirby Joseph for the Lions. Awesome rookie season, has continued to pop takeaways where teams haven't been able to split those safeties when they're in 2-out shells because of the way that he can undercut seam routes and stuff like that. But for the way that he moves, you don't realize how big he is, which allows him to bring down bigger runners effectively. 3 interceptions, 5 PBUs, a couple of forced fumbles, and a bunch of great tackles. Then also Jesse Bates for the Bengals, who we weren't sure if he was going to play for Cincinnati this season early on because of some of the contract disputes in the offseason. Coming off a below average season for his standards, I would say. He's once again earning money for himself. You rarely see guys being able to fit balls into those windows between him and the corner. Does a great job of positioning himself and denying any type of layups. He's allowed a completion percentage barely above 50% as the primary coverage defender, and has made several key tackles short of the sticks. And then the final one, I almost don't want to go with another guy from the top row because interceptions are by far not everything. And as we go down a little bit here, Kevin Byard, even if he hasn't had one of those ball hook type seasons, is still great. But ultimately, I think Andre Cisco is my choice here for the Jaguars. A guy I loved coming out of Syracuse, always has had great ball skills and produced big turnovers throughout his college and pro career. And his instincts have really shined this season. But he's also a very physical player, dislodging receivers from the ball and creating instant stops against bigger ball carriers. Even though one of his most recognized hits should have been flagged and led to a concussion for Juju Smith-Schuster. But he's quietly had a really good season for Jacksonville. And now let's quickly run for the special teams here. Starting with the kicker position, who are listed by makes rather than percentages, which makes no sense at all. But just the easy ones here. Justin Tucker, the GOAT, having another great season. Tyler Bass for the Bills, banging in so many long kicks in the blistering wind up in Buffalo, as well as taking advantage of when he was in Detroit those 2 weeks. Then we got Daniel Carlson for the Raiders, tied with Tucker for the most makes and really identical numbers this season, which is pretty crazy. Jason Myers for the Seahawks, just 1 miss all season long, despite some of the win conditions you have in Seattle. I think he hasn't missed the PAT either, which you don't see here, which isn't great. But then we got Graham Gano for the Giants. I want to show some love to. Really one of the most valuable players on the Giants team. Look at the way that he's come through with all those big kicks in those one-score games. And then Brett Maher, as we scroll down a little bit further, for the Cowboys. 21 of 24 as well. Has only missed 1 kick below 50 yards. And already has 8 makes beyond that mark, which is pretty nuts as well. Then we get to long snap, I believe is next, which I just refuse to vote for 6 names here, because I simply don't study these guys, even if I know who some of the better ones are. But let's just move on to punter instead. And the first one here, Tressway for Washington. Number 1 in terms of punts inside the 20 as you see here, but also number 3 in fair catches forced, and pretty high up there in net yards per. Then we got Johnny Hacker for the Panthers, who is not as well recognized as he was with the Rams, but still really good, 2nd and 4th respectively in those categories that I just mentioned. Then I'm going to give you 3 rookies here. Ryan Stonehouse for the Titans, who just has a monster leg, which is indicated by the 54 at average. Ryan Wright for the Vikings, who has really been huge for them in all those tight games, because of the way that he's helped them win field position battles. And the third one, Jake Marta for the Bucks, a little bit further down here. One of the best length of the kick compared to hang time ratios. Plus the final one, I'm gonna go back up to the top here with Mitch Wisnowski for the 49ers. A big reason for San Francisco not being as aggressive with fourth down decision making, as they trust their specialists really with him and Robbie Gould in terms of kickers. That has us moving on to the return specialists, which at this point, I'm just ranting here, but ranked by total kick returns, which is just absurd, being graded based on how many times your defense has allowed opponents to score, basically. That makes no sense whatsoever. Either way, we'll scroll down a little bit here for the first one. Devin Duvernay for the Ravens has been the most consistent returnman in football over the last 2 years, I believe, with sprint to speed and great balance to make things happen. Then Kevontae Turpin, who has also been a star for the Cowboys ever since his 2-touchdown performance in preseason and has consistently delivered big plays, other than the one punt that he dropped last week. Ray McCloud for the 49ers just had a really good showing against the Bucks and has been able to avoid fumbles this season, which was really the big issue for him in Pittsburgh. Then Braxton Berrios for the Jets. Just somebody very consistently gains positive yards and sets up his team in good field position. And then let's just go with two rookies here. Marcus Jones for the Patriots had that game-winning punt return versus the Jets and scored a touchdown on offense the week later as well, which has kind of been an element now for the Patriots to use. And the last one, Montre Washington for the Broncos. Another guy very dynamic with the ball in his hands, really dangerous, and has now been earning opportunities at receiver as well because of it. And the final category of the ballot, as we're kind of running long here, special teamers. Just some of the guys that have stood out this season to me, flying down the field, showing no regard for the bodies, and making big plays. I'm certainly not going to vote for Matthew Slater here, as you see him in the top row, who out of kind of laziness by the people has been the number one vote getter for the last decade, I believe. Don't want to take anything away from his career because he's been one of the great special teams for sure. But at this point, he's not even the right Patriot to be up here, because that should really be Brandon Schooler, who is Belichick's next maniac on that unit. But let me just give you the names here that I came up with. Saran Neal for the Bills. He's somebody who stands out every week. Then we get to Andrew Wingard all the way at the bottom here. Almost couldn't find him. Just looks like a maniac already with the long hair, and you can really see him flying around. At times on defense, but especially on special teams. Jeremy Reeves for Washington. He stood out on several occasions. Then we get to Sam Franklin for the Panthers. Another guy who kind of flashes off the screen every week. MJ Stewart for the Texans. One of the bright spots. If offense and defense can't really get it done, you need a guy like that who creates some of those splashes at times on special teams and kick coverage. And Hassan Haskins for the Titans has been getting some work in running back as well. And I would really like to vote for another Titans guy here, Dylan Cole, who is another one of those maniacs like I called him already. Not much to say here, but I also checked and they're all pretty high up there in pure special teams tackles. So now I think we just go next position, send us back to the quarterbacks. We're going to review selections and then just submit a ballot here. And that's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and maybe just share it with a friend or two. That would really help me out. Links to my page are footballtalk.com, where you can find all my content in one place, and my social media outlets can be found down below in the video description. Feel free to let me know what you think of my ballot, whether you agree or disagree, what do you think of the voting process in general, and if you still have time, do cast your own ballot. I'll be back next week with a written piece again, not 100% sure what it'll be about, but probably something playoff related, like previewing certain matchups, or maybe what I think the final playoff seedings will look like. You can comment down below if you have any topics that you'd like me to cover, and I'll definitely have a look into that. So until then, see you later. Peace!